See, look at this. She comes in here and just starts showing you up. Man.
And libraries are often cinematic. You know, the rows of books, the peeking over the books to see inside. I mean, it's just perfect for a horror film.
Hippo teeth. They're like big wooden teeth, which creeps me out to no end.
Are you ready to get loud and frightful in the library? That's how we roll. We're edgy like that. We're outlaws, right? She's laughing. Welcome. This is the Fright Club podcast, and she is Hope Madden.
He's George Wolf.
And we are from madwolf.com, talking about libraries' horrific moments in horror films that revolve around the library. And there's a lot of good ones, and we've got a great special guest to dive into it with us and shush us. Shush. That's hard to say. Let me try that again. Shush us. That is tough. Shush us in the library. But first, we want to say thanks for the great feedback. Last week, we talked about motorcycles in horror with Jamie Ray, and that turned out to just be a blast. I know for your sake, the conversation kind of went off the rails a little bit, but it was fun.
It was fun. And it's, we did it. The topic was really for you because you are our motorcycler. Actually, Jamie as well. But I was a little surprised because most of the movies aren't very good and you wouldn't like them. But then you
That's
guys
true.
got off on this Kolchak tangent.
And Evel Knievel.
Right. And I just sat here like, I'll just go then. You guys can.
But it was fun, and we got a lot of great feedback about it. Turns out a lot of other people like Kolchak and Evel Knievel, Missy. So we had to give us a little bit of time for that. But we had a few recommendations of ones that we missed.
Well, the first one that I can't believe that we missed is Cemetery Man.
I know.
That I'm so shocked by that. I'm so surprised. Seth pointed that one out. I can't believe I forgot that one. Also, Blade. Duh. And actually, it was Jamie. I think he thought of that probably right after we got off the air. And that always happens. As soon as you're done with it, you're like, oh, I can't believe I forgot that one. And then many people have pointed out, including Corey and Dark Dave, Nightmare on Elm Street 5, where he actually turns into a motorcycle. I mean, it deserved a mention. It's not good, but it deserved a mention.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks to Jamie, and thanks for everybody for all the great feedback. As we're moving on, we're still digging into the topics that were suggested, right, on the Fright Club podcast Facebook group. Hint, hint, there should be some sort of sound effect that goes off when I'm pushing that Facebook group. So if you're not a member, just send me a request, and I'll accept it in a second. But we put that word out on the Facebook group and got a lot of great topic suggestions, and we're still working off that.
Oh, and we will be for a while. Yeah. So what we did was we did a poll on the Facebook group, but also on Twitter to sort of pull in a larger group, and we picked just sort of at random. We picked 4 of the topics that were in there: Poe, insects, libraries, and parks or playgrounds. And Poe won Twitter pretty handily, but he lost Facebook pretty handily, which is, I'm just curious what that means exactly. And libraries, basically, it leveled out, so libraries win.
That's cool. And I know we have a few, I think more than a few librarians in the Fright Club group, the Fright Clubbers.
We do. We love librarians, yes.
Especially this week.
Right. Well, I think the topic came from Pina Joe, beloved Pina Joe, but then Brandon Thomas, who is not only a Fright Clubber, but he writes for Mad Wolf, so he's very much one of us. He's also
one of us.
I was waiting for it. He's also a librarian, so we're lousy with librarians.
Especially this week, we're going to add one more to the Fright Club posse here, because it was really cool. In doing research for this podcast, I stumbled across this great website. It's reallibrarians.com, and it impressed me so much that I had to say, we were going to tape just a few nights ago, and I said, no, we can't. We got to put it on hold and reach out to the people behind this website and get them on here. And we're so happy that Jennifer Snook Brown accepted our invitation, and she is our special guest, a real live in the flesh librarian who's also a big movie buff. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, and thanks for reaching out and that we could do this together.
I think it's cool if you go to the first page there on reallibrarians.com, you sum up your mission with a math equation.
Yes, it's librarians plus movies equals real love.
Real with 2 E's, right?
Right, real with 2 E's. It's a pun that really works visually and not so much, auditory, but y'all get it.
Well, this is great because we're going to run down our list here of favorite library moments in horror, and then if you would agree to come back maybe in a few months for a future episode, then we'll really dig into some of your favorite and our favorite librarians in horror, if that works out for you.
That would be awesome. I'd love to come back and delve into librarians, especially killer librarians.
Nice.
The best kind.
See, she's our people. I like this.
Totally is.
I like this. This is going to work out very, very well. All right. So before we get into our final list here, I know, Hope, you've got some also rans. Deserve a mention?
Yes, I do. Because, it's the first time we talked about this, when it was first suggested as a topic, I mean, I was all over this, and I immediately thought we could do two, because you can do one that's just about microfiche. And then you could do another one that's not about microfiche, but is about libraries. And then I didn't even think about, of course, the third one about librarians themselves. I don't know why. Actually, Jennifer has a theory as to why it is that libraries are so popular in horror. But part of it is, I'm nostalgic about this because it's all changed now. That scene where the sleuth used to go to the town library to look up who used to own this haunted house, or, to get the dirt on what is going on that is causing the horror in their life. Now they just Google it. Now that's the cliche scene in every movie at the beginning of Act 2 where they just get online and start Googling information. And that's where they come across the same scenes where you just see a highlight of a sentence at a time, and then, a well-placed satanic drawing from some book from the 16th century. And you used to actually have to go to the library to get that stuff. It's funny to me, this was such an incredibly common scene in horror movies up until, the mid-90s. And now, like, urban legend might be the last one that I remember to really do it. So the more I looked into it, kind of the sadder I got that we've lost this scene completely.
I think that's a really good observation about sort of this nostalgic bit of technology that's outdated. But I also kind of love it when they show close-ups of like Google searches or like whatever fake Google that they're using to stand in for that. Because for me, I geek out because I'm like, what keywords are they using? Is this skills? And I actually often write about that too on my blog.
How do you feel about microfiche?
Oh my goodness. I just had a conversation about microfiche versus microfilm and how there's a difference. And libraries often still have it because it is actually good technology, and a lot of archives have it, like newspapers. Some like town newspapers, they're only available on microfiche, and there's specific equipment, but there's this whole move to digitize it as well. But there's so many resources like newspaper reports, and that's the scene often in movies that you see.
Yeah.
Like it's news for articles, exactly. But there's so much more that's not digitized. So it still has a place, but they're just in the back of the library. They're not up front anymore.
Well, we almost had a top 5 here of microfiche because you have nods to Silence of the Lambs, Amityville Horror, Candyman, and The Ring, all in the microfiche category. So.
Oh, we could do more, but those are the best ones. Those are the best microfiche scenes. Especially, I think the very best one might be Amityville Horror.
And then looking at just some also rans that almost made the list. What do you got?
Well, Clockwork Orange, which I thought, there's so many times where I say this, I really thought Clockwork Orange was going to make the final list. Because there's a great scene in the prison library where the chaplain thinks that because he spent so much time in the Bible that he's really turned a corner. And in fact, he's just imagining himself at the height of Roman fashion whipping Jesus because Alex is a bad guy. And then Blackmail is another one. Not much takes, this is 1929. It's early Hitchcock. It's got to be the first of the thriller/horror films that use a library, but it's mainly the guy jumps off the top. So there's not a lot in the library itself, but it's worth seeing. You should check that one out. Urban Legend, as I say, it's just a good jump scare. It's not a great scene. It's just a good jump scare. The Church, it's a terrible movie. It's one of those bad Italian, but it's so bad. But it's got a great library scene. The Ninth Gate, which he's like a book historian. So 35% is in libraries. Another 60% is in bookstores. And then it's not a horror film at all, but John Wick 2 has my favorite murder in a library.
And do you mean John Wick 3? Because that's the one that's the New York Public Library in the fight scene.
I do mean John Wick 3. Good call.
See, look at this. She comes in here and just starts showing you up. Man. Nicely done. So that's some of the ones that didn't quite make our list of favorite horrific moments in the library. This is not just about librarians in horror, but trust me, we will get to that when Jennifer joins us for part 2 weeks down the line. But we want to get into our top 5 library moments in horror. So you want to just dive in?
Yeah.
Let's go to 1995. 2 detectives, a rookie and a veteran, hunt a serial killer who uses the 7 deadly sins as his motives. It's 7.
Gentlemen, I'll never understand. All these books, a world of knowledge at your fingertips. What do? You play poker all night.
Hey, we got culture.
Yeah, we got culture coming out our ass.
All right. How's this for culture?
So not a ton happens in this scene. And one of the reasons that I chose this scene is because it's like it takes every single one of those cliche moments where somebody does the research in the library and it turns it into something that is actually beautifully shot, incredibly well acted, and moves the entire plot forward in a very organic way. So often in these films, the whole thing just comes to the screeching halt and it feels very contrived. But when David Fincher directs it, he lets you, like, it's all the things you're expecting. You're expecting this really elegant library that's dark, and these, I don't know why they always have those beautiful green lamps on all of the tables, but they always do, and they do in this one, you know. And but between Morgan Freeman, and it's the same thing. Somebody delivers him these giant books. We just see it on the montage of him flipping through, finding these medieval drawings, photocopying them, making stacks of them. We just see highlights of specific terminology that he's finding just willy-nilly as he thumbs through these books that somebody brought to him. But the way that it's put together, and the way the music is glorious, and the way that it, as he looks at something, for example, he keeps finding this old pen and ink drawing that involves a decapitation, and then they will flip out to Brad Pitt's character, who's also doing some research and kind of rubbing his eyes and looking at these very graphic photos of the crime scenes. And then they go back to this beautifully lit, beautifully sound-escaped library where there'll be some other thing that's going to trigger. You know, they'll show another decapitation and they cut back and Gwyneth Paltrow is peeking in on Brad Pitt. So there's so much foreboding happening. And it's so much that same scene that we saw in so many horror movies, but it's done so beautifully that it had to be the one we chose.
Yeah, I really love this scene because it's showing, you know, the after hours scene in a library, and it's got the library security guards who allow Morgan Freeman in. So clearly there's some history there. This is not the first time that he's done this. And I really love this scene because it's, like you said, it's so cinematic. And libraries are often cinematic. You know, the rows of books, the peeking over the books to see inside. I mean, it's just perfect for a horror film. And I love the juxtaposition of the classical music, which is so cerebral. And then you have those gory drawings, you know, inside of that. But and it's funny, like Fincher was definitely like into those library lamps, those green library lamps.
Oh, yeah.
But I have to say, as a librarian, this is where my librarian geeky side comes out when I'm watching a movie. I'm like, that is so unrealistic. It takes so long. It takes so long to close down a library, and somebody has to go in there and turn off all those lamps. I'm like, okay, this is, you know, what's that called? The suspension of disbelief when it comes to a movie. But yeah, it's a beautiful scene.
And I'm sure I don't have to tell you, but one moment in the film, since it was 1995, about halfway through, someone states that it's not necessarily legal to monitor library records, but then that was made legal, right, by the Patriot Act.
Well, actually, there's more about that because librarians actually pushed back about that, and that actually requires a court order and a judge's order for that. So it was a huge deal in libraries about how we go about that and to how that we actually make sure that we're following the law and require an actual order and judgment. And it's known as, oh goodness, I've forgotten now, but there's a group of librarians called the Connecticut Four who in 2005 with the Patriot Act, they were served, you know, the national security letter, and they actually pushed back on the behalf of patron privacy, library user privacy. And it was a big deal in the library world to clarify that the Patriot Act, they needed a judge's court order to be able to get patron records. So yeah, I think about that when I watch that movie too.
Just one more example of librarians being our heroes.
Yay!
Hey, we didn't even give a shout out to your library. Where are you a librarian?
I work at Tacoma Community College Library in Tacoma in the state of Washington.
Nice. Nice. All right. Moving up to number 4 on our list of library moments in horror. This is the summer of 1989. A group of bullied kids band together to destroy a shape-shifting monster. It's the big screen version, part 1 of It.
Egg boy.
What on earth are you doing?
Here's another one, I guess, where, I mean, more happens in this library scene than happens in 7, but still, there's a lot of page turning, a lot of looking at pictures. You see some things in the background before his attention gets carried away and he wanders off and has a scary moment. But it's one where you really have to pay attention to all the things that are going on around him as he's doing research in the library.
You do, and I think one of the reasons that these scenes are sometimes very effective is that they are really quiet, which they would be because they're in a library. So it's asking you to pay attention, to look at what Ben, the character, is looking at. But then also in this movie, if you look around, this is the first instance of a creepy librarian. Because she comes over and she's kind of judgy, she's kind of mean, and you think, don't be mean to this kid. He clearly has no friends. But then while he's doing his research, if you just scan the crowd and see what she's doing,
right.
At the time, I kept expecting her to turn into
I did too.
Pennywise.
I did too.
Because she's kind of got red hair and she just is looking, she's smiling a lot, but she's looking very menacing. It's a very cool effect.
I really like this movie and the sequel, It Chapter 2. And at the very beginning of this scene, there is actually a looming librarian she's out of focus, but she's got that evil grin that Pennywise has. So I think that you're right on with is the librarian going to be Pennywise as well, that evil grin. And I think it again plays into that stereotype of librarians, being scary. And I also had a similar expression of thought when she comes up to Ben and asks, like, don't you have any friends? And my literal reaction, and this is in my blog post about it, I literally said out loud, judgy bitch.
That's awesome.
It is, I think, also fun toward the end of the scene before he leaves the library and goes down into, sort of the basement where they keep files and things. Just the one balloon over there, which is it's early enough in the film that it's still just enough to be like this tingling menace, like, there it is.
Right. And that goes back to the 1990 version, which I'm sure y'all get into.
Well, speaking of, let's move up to number 3 on our list. And this one is set in 1960, where the 7 preteen outcasts fight the evil demon. This is the 1990 version of It.
Come on up, Richie. I got a balloon for you. Don't you want a balloon? What's the matter? One balloon, not enough. Try a bitch!
One of the reasons I love the scene, there are 1,000 reasons why I love the scene, and one of them is that it's not your typical horror movie. I'm doing the research in the library scene. It's completely different. And also because Tim Curry is glorious in this. He's so good, just cracking these stupid jokes about Prince Albert in a can, while all of these balloons descend and then, blow up one after another full of blood that only Richie can see. It's such a creepy scene. And then he's shouting real loud so he can't hear Pennywise shouting at him. And the poor librarian, this very young librarian, is just like, she's shell-shocked by what's happening and why this man is screaming in her face. I just think, I don't love that. I especially don't love the part of the 1990 version where it focuses on the adults. I think it's a lackluster version of this story, but that scene is incredibly well put together and super effective.
And you forgot to mention Harry Anderson's outfit.
It was funny.
That's one that just reinforces how scary Tim Curry is. in that role, and what made part one of that for me just so scary. I mean, he's so good in that it was one of those deals, almost like every time someone new has played the Joker, because the person before was so good. I mean, Skarsgård did a great job in the movie, but man, Tim Curry was so incredibly iconic in that, and probably for a lot of people embedded their fear of clowns just from his performance.
Yeah. So when I think of that version of it, the 90 version, the very first image is that balloon popping in the library and blood everywhere. I mean, it's just so visceral. But I do need to give a shout out for the second half with the adults, because Tim Reed as the adult Mike Hanlon, who's the town librarian, and Isaiah Mustafa played that same character in the It Chapter 2, the recent one. That librarian, he is the true hero of the story. He's the one who stays behind. He's the answer man. I think they call him that. He's the researcher. He's the one who draws them back to town to figure out how to kill him. And it's important that, as the only Black member of the Friends group, the Losers Club, there's a lot there about why he is the one to stay behind, right? That institutional memory. And the 2017 It Chapter 1, they actually changed that story of like who was responsible, who was interested in the history of that town. They changed that character to Ben in the 2017 version, which to me was a loss of that character, because Mike is such an important character as for me, the foundational hero and the end for that story. So librarian bias, I have to admit it.
Well, at least you admit it.
Yes.
The 1990 version of It, that is our number 3 on our library moments of horror. Taking us up to number 2, this is one that centers on the next great psycho horror slasher, giving a documentary crew exclusive access to his life as he plans his reign of terror over the sleepy town of Glen Echo. From 2006, Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon.
The boy murdered Silas, buried his body in the field, and dragged Molly from the house, hanging her in the farm's apple orchard.
You have to tell me. What happens to me?
This is one we always like to talk about because we find that not a lot of people have seen it. I remember back so long ago, when we were still doing our live events, we had this live and so many people had not seen it and everybody loved it. It's become a little bit of a cult classic, although still, I think, underseen.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that I can't imagine anybody disliking. I mean, especially if you like horror. It's a hard movie not to like. It's very clever. Nathan Basil, who plays Leslie Vernon, is just awesome. It's not like a lampooning, which you see a lot of slasher movies. It's really very affectionate, but at the same time, it just draws your very specific attention to all of the notes, really the hero's quest of the slasher films. And of course, that means that there is a library scene. There's a scene where they go to the library to learn the backstory. And one of the reasons that this one is, really partly because every time this movie stops and closely examines a trope in the slasher, it does it so well. But the chef's kiss here is Zelda Rubinstein.
And it was her last movie, her last film role, and she plays the librarian. And that's where we get, instead of going and studying the microfiche, we get the story from her. And in that incredible voice that is so well known, and that's the scene that we're talking about for the Rise of Leslie Vernon. And really, that's it for the library, right? For the library scene in this movie. But you're right, it takes apart all those different tropes of the slasher movie and does it so well, and gives us the backstory here from Zelda the Librarian. Have you seen this one, Jennifer?
I have not. I was totally unfamiliar with this. So I'm one of the, people that you mentioned who are unfamiliar with this movie. I'm excited. I'm intrigued to watch it. And I need to add it to my list, clearly.
Yeah, it's one. I don't really know why. It must have not gotten any marketing at the time, because still so few people have really seen it. When you run into a lot of horror fans, that's one that they have to dig up. But yeah, I will be surprised if you don't like it. So you'll have to get back to us when you do.
I will.
But it kind of worked out because you gave us a movie that even Hope hadn't seen as one of your favorite librarian horror movies.
That's right. Chainsaw Sally, indie film, kind of classic or maybe cult classic indie film from 2004. And Chainsaw Sally is the main character, and she is a serial killer librarian. So really excited.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to watch that one. I'm very excited.
We'll talk more about that when we have you on next time. All right, before we get up to number one on our list, let's talk more about reallibrarians.com. That is your site, and I was scanning it, like I said, doing research for this. I was so impressed. I mean, you have different blog posts getting into all different, not just horror movies, right, about librarians, but just librarians in general in movies.
Yes, that's right, because librarians are in all types and genres of films. We're particularly strong, I would say, in horror films. But yeah, which, is kind of a weird thing to say, and I think unexpected for people to hear. But I also surprise librarian colleagues with how many movies that we are portrayed in as well. So yeah, I've been actually researching this for about 20 years since my undergrad days. It was the topic of my undergraduate thesis because I knew I was going to become a librarian. And then I've been doing the website for almost 10 years. So yeah, I get into a lot of different things, but particularly with horror movies, it's interesting that we run the gamut as well. And by we, I mean librarians. Like, we're main characters, we're like those supporting characters. And there's a lot of movies that just have the library set, but not librarians. So I go into all of that as well, and it's super fun.
And are you the only person who writes for your blog?
Yeah, I'm the creator of it. I write almost everything on the blog. I do have some guest posts from librarians who I usually reach out to them, and they'll post. And I say that because I'm having a couple of guest posts upcoming in the next month or so. But yeah, I primarily write, and I publish 2 posts a month. The second and fourth Wednesdays of every month. When I started it, it was 3 times a week. And yeah, I couldn't keep that up, but
that's a lot.
It's a lifelong research passion project.
Well, I highly recommend you check it out. When I stumbled upon it, I got lost in there for a while, and it's real-librarians.com. So good job, Jennifer. I love it.
Thank you. And it brings me to a whole host of interesting people and experiences. And like, already y'all have added another movie to my list, and it's just amazing. I feel like I have this growing network of friends and family who are, now that you know about librarians, like, you always like looking for them. And then I get contacted by, you need to add this movie to your list. So it's been great. So I appreciate this connection with y'all and and me finding out this podcast as well.
And we appreciate it very much. So very quickly, when was the last time you had to throw somebody out for being loud?
Never. Never. That's a common misconception with libraries and librarians, where, I mean, we do have some quiet spaces, and some libraries, like rare books libraries, and archives may have, sound rules. But I chuckle sometimes when people come up into the library and they apologize for speaking, or they apologize for asking a question. And I'm like, no, this is why we're here. We're here for people to research, and it's a public place. It's a community space for people, for art and culture and all of that. Like the security guards in 7, we've got culture, right? And And I was like, please don't apologize. We're here for the community. We're here to help you do research and answer questions. So that is, but I think that common misconception of, quiet and shushing and, rules based, I think it lends itself to horror because it's playing off of that, what happens if you break the rules? What happens? And it's just ripe for the horror movie genre.
I think that makes sense. While we are doing some shout outs, I want to draw everybody's attention to the fact that Pina Joe, Katie, who is a librarian at the Upper Arlington Public Library, co-hosted a podcast called The Library Gals this week. So you guys should check it out.
I think the point here, librarians are taking over. That's pretty clear. They're taking over this podcast for sure as we move up to number 1, our favorite horrific moment with libraries. And it's 3 former parapsychology professors setting up shop as a unique ghost removal service. What else is it going to be? Who are you going to call, Ghostbusters?
Hello. I'm Peter. Where are you from? Originally.
Shh.
All right, okay. The usual stuff isn't working.
Okay, I have a plan. I know exactly what to do. Now stay close. Stay close. I know. exactly as I say. Get ready. Ready?
Get her!
I don't think we have talked about Ghostbusters on this podcast before because, truth be told, it's not a horror film.
We never have?
I don't think we have because I don't think it's ever made the list. I mean, I'm sure tangential conversations, but I don't think it's ever made the list because it's definitely a comedy that happens to be about ghosts. Not a horror movie at all, but I couldn't possibly see talking about librarians and libraries and horror without talking about the great first scare in Ghostbusters because for a lot of people, it's the only scary part of Ghostbusters, and she's scary, and it's so funny the way they shoot the scene because Bill Murray, he's got to be the one, right? He's got to be the one, Venkman, he's got to be the one who goes and talks to her, but you know right away, you're like, no, you're going to get in trouble because you talk too much, and she gives him
shushes him.
She shushes him, she does, and then he's like, back up, let's rethink this, and then of course the great, get her, it was so good, but it's such a great scene and it's such a creepy ghost, and when you can do like the freeze frame of it, and she's got almost like they're like hippo teeth, they're like big wooden teeth, which creeps me out to no end. Anyway, it's a fairly perfect scene.
I totally agree. It's such an iconic scene, and I just love the juxtaposition of this, stereotypical librarian, at the beginning with the bun and the high neck, like Victorian dress. And like, she's the one scaring everybody. And I love this thing, like it scared the socks off some poor librarian. Cause there's some other librarian characters. There's Alice, who's the librarian who gets her socks scared off by the library ghost. And I remember reading, or it was the DVD commentary for this movie, that scene, where the library ghost gets scary, that was one of the first special effects that they did. And when they were testing it for audiences, they knew they had a hit, or they knew that the film would work because that scene scared them. And so they knew it. Scary librarian, we got a hit.
Yeah, and actually, as they were, from what I understand, as they were preparing for it, they first had even more scary version of the puppet that they used, but that was rejected. But that puppet went on to appear in the 1985 version of Fright Night.
Wow, I wonder if it was the girlfriend at the end when she has all those teeth, because that's a creepy puppet.
Oh, I bet you that's right.
That would be the scariest librarian ever.
And of course, there's a lot of at least the outside of Ghostbusters is also remembered for the outside of the library, as far as, because this was a great intro to what was going to happen, but then the outside of the library is shown a lot.
Yeah, and actually, it's a funny thing. I went, the first time that I ever went to New York, I was working for a publisher, and I went with my editor, and we had the afternoon to just go tool around, and that was it. That was the only place I wanted to go, and that was why. It's not because I went inside and checked out books. I wanted to see the outside of the library because of Ghostbusters, and I wasn't 15. I was an adult, and I made my boss find this so we could take a picture of me on those steps.
Somehow, I don't think you're the only one that's ever done that. Such an iconic library scene in horror movies. Number one had to be Ghostbusters from 1984 for sure. And Jennifer Snook Brown from RealLibrarians.com has been our guest. But you've already agreed. You can't back out now. You're going to join us later. You're going to join us in a few weeks or so, and we'll have you back on, and we'll talk about librarians themselves. Librarians. And I know you got a bunch of those on your list probably to talk about. You've got some faves.
I definitely do. I'm so looking forward to coming back and talking about librarians, especially main characters in horror films, because there's so many great, scary examples.
We've talked about the website. It's reallibrarians.com. That's real-librarians.com. Is that the best place to find you? Where else can we find you anywhere else on social media?
That's the best place, yeah.
There's lots of great blogs on there. And actually, too, some great conversations in the comments. That's how I got a hold of you. It's always fun to see when people are engaging, amongst themselves into something that you've written. So it's a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. I'm glad that you checked it out.
And of course, you always know you can find us on Twitter. We're at Fright Club Pod. That's the best way to keep the conversation going. Let us know if there's any that we missed, any that should have been higher, should have been lower, your favorite library moments in horror. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. It's Mad Wolf Columbus, and the main website where you can find all of our written movie reviews and our other weekly podcast about all the new movie releases called The Screening Room. That's all right there at madwolf.com.
So for March, we're going to take a break from the recommendations because we already had some things planned the Oscar nominations are going to come out. So we're going to do, which is really, I think, my favorite one every year. We're going to do a Skeletons in the Closet. So we'll talk about some Oscar nominees and their bad horror past. That's always so much fun. And also, March is the month of our son's birthday. So this year, he is going to join us, and we're going to do a podcast on screwed up families in horror. And that should be super fun and maybe not.
No, it will be. All right, all that is coming up soon. Keep in touch if you can. Please check out reallibrarians.com. This is just part one of our talk with Jennifer Snook Brown. It was a blast to have you on. Love having this perspective of a real live superhero librarian right here on Fright Club. So thank you so much, and we will talk again soon.
Thank y'all.
All right, so until next time, she is Hope Madden.
He's George Wolf.
And this is the Fright Club podcast. Do the honors, Jennifer.
Stay frightful, my friends.